Hello, Natalie Tarry here from Natematics. This is recording for my maths club, and it is showing you how to multiply and divide any number by 10, 100 and 1,000. And in fact, any number that is a multiple of 10, really. We could also potentially adapt it for, maybe 20, maybe 30, those sort of things. But that's another lesson. What I wanted to do is talk through the mechanics of what you need to do, what you need to look for, and then applying it to a couple of other questions, okay? So let's move through this. So first question is, I'm going to ask you to answer a few questions as we're going through this. And this is almost like a little bit of a warm-up to think, well, what do we do when we multiply by 10 and 100 and divide? So I'm going to throw a couple of questions here for you. So 7 times 10, 3 times 10. And then what about 7 times 100? 3 times 100. Then I'm going to change numbers a bit and say, well, actually, 50 divided by 10. 90 divided by 10. Is there any difference? And then 500 divided by 100 and 900 divided by 100. So just put pause on this for a second. Have a go at those. Just write them down. And then once you've done, just press play again. So going through each of these, we can put the answers in. So 700, 300 divided by 10 is 5, 9, 5, and 9. Is there a general rule for multiplying a number by 10 or 100 based on what you've seen here? Is there a general rule for dividing a number by 10 or 100? Again, based on what you're seeing here. Now, one answer that I often always get is, oops, I seem to have gone the other way, yeah. So, do we just add a 0 when we're multiplying by 10? Do we just add 2 zeros if we're multiplying by 100? And I'm just going to take that. I think that might give you the message, okay? No. Now, you may think, hang on a minute, Natalie, go back onto that first slide. And when you said, 5 times 10 was 50, so I just add a 0 on. Okay, right, let's just have a think about this then. So I know you're probably sitting there thinking, oh yeah, well, I know she's wrong. It's got to be it's got to be you just add a 0. Okay, so let's just do this example first. And I'm going to introduce it in a slightly different way. Most of you have probably seen something like this before. So we've got units, tens, hundreds, thousands, 10, that should be 10 hundredths there, 10 hundredths, 1,000, 10 thousandths, there you go. Now, and you've got 1/10 and 1/100th on the right-hand corner. It's what I call place value grid. And when you first learned about numbers, you kind of learned about where they fitted into this column. Now, I will warn you, I have an alarm that's going to go off in a minute to warn me to go and get my daughter. So if it goes and I say, stop, Alexa, that's fine. I'm just going to keep it in because I want to get this recorded. So 7.0, I'm going to put it in like that. And then, well, if we're multiplying by 10, what does that become? And I'm sure most of you will say, well, it's 70, Natalie. Yeah, it is. But what is the method that we're using? And that method is really, really important because there may be some numbers, one that you're going to see on the next slide, that if you just add a 0 to it, might not work. Bit of a clue. So let's have a look at, we're multiplying by 10. That 10 has 1 0. So that means we're going to move everything 1 space. But where are we going to move it? I'm talking about spaces. I'm talking about sort of left and right along the place value grid. So are we going to go left or are we going to go right? Well, I guess we know the answer is 70, so we can almost know it's got to go left. So what we do is we literally just take that number and we're going to move it 1 space to the left. Right, how many units have we got? This is where we have something called a placeholder. We've got 7 tens, but we don't have any units. So instead of just leaving it as 7, because most contexts you see numbers in, there isn't a place value grid, is there? So you need to distinguish between what's 7 and what's 70, 7 tens. Well, we need to put a 0 there, and that's what we call our placeholder, which is 0. Okay? So, and I know you'll be sitting there thinking, hang on a minute, Natalie, you said to me that we don't add a 0 on, but you've just shown me that we do. Okay, bear with me. Bear with me, it's coming. Right, what about this one then? 7.2 times 10. Oh, I'm all enthusiastic at the moment. And somebody's doing some works outside. I always tend to record these on days when, it must be Tuesdays my day, because bin cleaner next door. So 7.2 times 10. So let's get that lovely place value grid out again. And we're going to put 7.2 in. So we've got 7 units and then 2 tenths. I always show these columns with the fraction because it helps you to see that it's tenths, 1/10. That's quite helpful for some elements of maths. So again, we're multiplying by 10, 1 0. So we're going to move 1 space to the right. So every digit you've got is going to move 1 space. So the 7, like we did on before, so in 7 units, is going to become 7 tens. What about the 2? Now, the 2 is in the tenths column. If we move it 1 space to the right, some people say, well, it's going to be in that column. The decimal point is fixed. You can't just move that, unfortunately. It's a nice way of trying to understand what's going on sometimes, that you think you've got this decimal place hopping. If it helps you to understand, great. Mathematically, we don't move the decimal point. We move the numbers around it, okay? So that number 2 will move 1 space to the left, which is into 2. So everything's moving to the left. I'm just thinking earlier on, I don't know whether I said we move things to the right. That is definitely that way. So if I said right, it's not, it's that way. Okay, so, and we've just done this now. So 7.2 times 100. I've just remembered now, there was a point where I was going to make, was that, so if we add a 0, 7.2 times 10, does that become 7.20? I'll come back to that one in a minute. So let's do 7.2 times 100. So 7.2 multiplying by 100. How many zeros have we got there? 2. So we're multiplying by 10 and then by 10 again. That's another way of thinking about it, that we multiply by 100 is 10 times 10. So it's 1 space multiplied by 10, another space multiplied by 10, depending on how you understand these numbers. So 7.2, we're going to move it 2 spaces to the left. So moving to the left, we're going to move 2 spaces. And the same with the 2. It's going to do a little hoppity hop over there. And as always, we've got the blank in the units. So we've got 700s, 2 tenths, and 2 tens, not tenths, and 0 units. So it's 720. Right then. So I think this just adding a 0 doesn't really work, does it? It's about how many spaces left or right the numbers move. So let's do one more, which is 7.2 divided by 10. What do you think is going to happen? Have a think, write that number down. And then we'll go through it and tell me if you're right or not. So 7.2 is where we're starting. So there's 1 0 there. So we're going to move 1 space to the right, that way. So every digit is going to move 1 space that way. So the 7 is going to move from the units to the tenths. And then the 2 is going to move into the hundredths. And obviously you've got a decimal point there. And then you need a placeholder in the units. Because remember, if we don't have any units, we still have to show 0 point. Again, there's my alarm. Alexa, stop. That's the whole point, because if you put 0 point, otherwise that'll just look like 72 if you don't put that in there. And obviously every digit has a place and a different value depending on which column it's in. Right, I'm going to see if I can finish this off now and get it done. Okay, so what I can do is you can kind of summarize that. Okay, now I could just say, I could have just shown you that, and this is the rule. However, I like to get students to think about it and then actually then put to rest any guesses that they think, oh, they actually thought they knew how to do it, but actually they didn't. Most cases, yeah, it may be add a 0, but mathematically that, adding a 0 isn't maths. Multiplying by 10 is maths. And I always get students to say, oh, we just add a 0. Hang on a minute, what does add a 0 mean? It means I'm multiplying by 10, but not always. Right then, so those are the rules. So multiplying by 10, you move one space left, 100 and 1,000. Now, little thought for those people who perhaps want to challenge themselves, okay? And I want you to message me with the answer. What about if we multiply by, 1/10? So I'm literally moving along that place value grid. I'm saying, well, 1,000, 100, 10. I'm actually going to say, well, what if you multiply something by 1/10? What happens to the number? Come back to me and tell me that one. Okay, so dividing now. So if we divide by 10, we move one space to the right, 100, 2 spaces to the right, 1,000, 3 spaces to the right. What happens when we divide by 1/10? Message me. Okay, so what I've got now is 2 questions where I'm kind of going to apply those skills to a problem that potentially could come up in an exam. Now, or in real life, actually. Now, this question was from the CGP books. Now, I love the CGP books. I think they're a really, really nice, friendly way of practicing your maths. Now, this is the workbook for foundation GCSE maths. And there is actually a revision book. I've not got one to hand at the moment. So I did actually get the question from here, but the one in there was Blackpool Tower. I thought, nah, I'm going to use a similar question. Picture of the Shard, which is based in London, the London capital city of England. And this is the Shard. If you've ever been to London or seen it, I think it's, I don't know whether it is the tallest building in, I don't know whether it is the tallest building in London, but anyway, the Shard in London is 310 metres tall. That is a fact. I've checked it. A model of it is being built at a scale of 1 to 100. You might recognise this as a ratio here. So 1 to 100. How tall should the model be? We see this when you're looking at maps and things like that. And when you have a scale model and it'll have like this ratio. Maybe when you're looking at a map, you see like 1, 2, and then it's like 1 million or something like that. Because obviously a map that you see, it can be quite small. In reality, you're miles and miles apart. So a quick go over this then. So 1 to 100. So the 100 is the real life part. So then to convert it into the model, we divide by 100. So we're going, because obviously the biggest number is real life. The smallest number is the model. So it's like a little conversion. So for every 1 unit in your model, it represents 100 of those units in real life. So like, for example, 1 meter would be 100 meters in real life. Okay. So going from real life to model, you divide by 100. But what about if we were perhaps going for the model and we were going the other way? Just adding this for a bit of knowledge, really. Go in the opposite direction. What's the opposite of dividing by 100? Multiplying by 100. So let's look at the problem then. 310 meters. That's real life. So again, just sort of comparing to what we've got here. And it says to go from real life to the model, we need to divide by 100. So 310 divided by 100. You can kind of picture it in your head, maybe do a little place value grid or what have you. Well, 100, there's 2 zeros. You're dividing by it, so you're going that way. So the number will be 3.10 meters. So if you were to move every digit 2 spaces, that's what you would get. You might not need to show it like that. If you're asked to give it to 2 decimal places, that would be okay. However, 3.1 meters is totally fine, as I say, unless you've been told to give it to 2 decimal places. All right, I'm just watching the time now. I have 5 minutes. So if I can do these last little bits in 5 minutes, then I'm going to pick my daughter up again. I went to pick her up earlier on, actually, and she was having fun cooking. So I said, oh, she can stay, which is cool. Anyway, back to this. So we've got, you might have seen questions like this before. 32 times 456 is 14,592. What is 32 times 4,560? Now, put a calculator there. You are not allowed to use a calculator. I also will say that you do not need to calculate anything, okay? You don't have to then do this long multiplication. A question like this would probably be 1 mark, and you'd be like, how am I supposed to do that? 1 mark, like 1 minute. Right. If you notice, it'll probably say state rather than calculate. So what we do, if you notice, these numbers are very similar. The only differences are that they're kind of moved up or down the place value grid. So they've been multiplied or divided by 10, 100 or 1,000, okay? So what we do is compare the numbers we've got to the ones we had to start with. So 32 and 32, that's not changed. Now we've got 4,560 and 456. Well, what we've got now is 10 times bigger. Not, or we've just added a 0 on. You'll go in maths prison if you do that. So apply those changes now, one by one, to the original answer, which was 14,592. So the 32, we didn't change that number at all. The 456 is 10 times bigger. So that means our answer is going to be 10 times bigger. So again, just a little reminder of our place value grid. When we multiply by 10, we move 1 space left. And so we end up with that. Anything missing? We need that placeholder, don't we? So it is the correct number. So instead of being 14,592, it is 145,920. Imagine if that was a difference between what your pay was for the month. You'd want to make sure everything was in the right column, wouldn't you? Okay, 1 more, and then I do have to get my daughter. So, and that is the last one anyway. So, thinking about what we've just done, I would like you now to work this one out. I will say you are not allowed to use a calculator, and I am going to give you 1 minute to do that. However, press pause. I'm not waiting for a minute. I'm going to drink my drink quickly and move on to the next bit. Okay? Okay, so exactly the same as before. You recognise the digits are the same, the 3 and the 2 and the 4, 5, 6. They just moved, but you know, they've gone left or right on the place value grid. So as before, we've got 320 compared to 32, 10 times bigger. We've got 45.6, but it was 456. What's the difference? And again, we're always thinking about proportionally. That means what's it been multiplied by? What's it been divided by? How many times bigger or smaller is it? So we can say this number is 10 times smaller than that, i.e. it's been divided by 10. This one is 10 times bigger because it's been multiplied by 10. You get lots of extra bits in these little videos, so keep watching all the way through. You get all the extras as well. So then we're going to apply those changes one by one to the original answer. Do you have any idea what the answer might be at this point before I continue? Make a note of it, maybe write it down. Let's see if you were right at the end. So first one is we multiply by 10. Multiply by 10, 1 space right, 1 space left. I'm doing that by me left. Okay, all the arrows are all in the right way. I have checked that. So if the wrong word crept in, everything's right on the slide. Okay. So 1 space to the left. So therefore we end up with 145,920. Now, what about now? We need to then divide by 10. So what happens when we divide by 10? We move to the right 1 space. What's going to happen? We're going to end up with exactly what we had to start with, aren't we? Did you guess that's what was going to happen? Because looking at it, if you multiply something by 10 and then you divide it by 10, aren't you then cancelling them out? That's exactly what we do when we're doing things like solving equations. If we want to cancel out a divide by 10, we multiply by 10. If we're cancelling out a multiply or a divide, we do the opposite, yeah? So it's always good here to actually have a look at the things you've got to do and actually say, well, what's the overriding change to the answer? So if we're doing that, there's going to be no change. If you've got, say, multiply by 100 and then divide by 10, what's the overriding answer? Multiply by 100, divide by 10. Multiply by 10 is the overriding answer. So there you go. That's just that. And I'm just going to stop sharing now, just to finish off. So that's given you an idea of the whole concept of multiplying and dividing by 10, 100, 1,000. What we can do then also is apply that to things like multiplying by 20. So think about, well, if we multiply by 20, that's the same as multiplying by 2 and then 10. So I think, well, actually, I can multiply by 10. I know that method of left and right and whatever, whichever one you're doing. And then you just multiply everything there by 2. Something to look out for. So maybe just pick a few numbers, random numbers, just do a little calculation on your phone and do or your calculator and do say 23 times 596.3, whatever, get your answer. And then just have a little play around, moving the numbers left and right and think, do I get the right answer? And use your calculator to check that you're right. Okay. Thank you for watching. If you've got any feedback, please do. If you're watching this on YouTube, leave me a comment, because it's always nice to see the people that watch my videos. And feel free to share and help anyone else. There's lots more coming. Take care. Have a good day. Bye-bye.